They called me the pastor's daughter, the daughter of Reverend Charles, the moral pillar, the spiritual leader the entire town of Oak Hollow admired. They said I was lucky to be born into a righteous family, where every prayer echoed from a throne of virtue. But they didn't know that inside that very church where they bowed their heads in worship, a secret had been buried beneath cold stone for years. I'm Ivy. And I was thrown out of my own mother's memorial service right between the candlelight and hymns just for asking one question. Where did the donation money go? My father looked at me like I was the devil himself. My sister leaned in and whispered, "Don't dig. Mom did once, and she died." Not Mom did once. But I didn't back down. A map tucked inside a Bible. A voice recording from a mother long gone. A hidden safe beneath the old church floor. And a video where my mother spoke her final words. If you're seeing this, then your father erased me just like he erased the truth. I used to believe faith was light. But in Oak Hollow, it's a curtain covering men who dress like angels but swear by lies. This is the story of betrayal within my own family. Of truth buried deep. And of a daughter who stayed silent until she started digging through cement and cold blood. What kind of secret could stay hidden under a church for all these years? Don't look away, this story is just beginning. That Sunday morning, the sky over Oak Hollow was spotless, no clouds, no hint of rain. The sunlight poured down like molten gold, but inside me, there was only one thing: darkness. I had come back to town after nearly a year of silence, no calls, no welcomes. Mom had been gone for almost 2 years, and this was the first time Dad held a public memorial for her. They called it a Thanksgiving for the soul of Caroline, but to me, it was the biggest performance from a family that had mastered the art of pretending. I walked into the church foyer, hit instantly by the smell of polished pine and Lily's memories of when Mom was still alive. She used to arrange the flowers early on Saturdays, quietly smiling when she caught me sneaking pastries from the kitchen before service. Everything looked the same now, but the feeling was completely different. People turned to look at me like I didn't belong. Some nodded faintly. Others looked away. And Ruth Ann came toward me, arms out, wrapping me in a hug that felt like a snake around my throat. "Ivy, you actually came. That's brave of you." Her voice was syrupy sweet, but her eyes sparkled with disdain. I nodded, saying nothing. My father stood at the pulpit, chatting with the choir. He didn't look at me. Didn't smile, didn't nod. Just kept his back to me like I was an empty seat in the last row. The service started right on time. Praise filled the air, and the choir dressed in white sang hymns that lulled the room into faith. Ruth Ann spoke first, delivering memories of Mom in a voice so perfectly broken it could have won awards. She said Mom was the picture of humility, of faithful loyalty, and of quiet sacrifice. My hands clenched. Quiet? If I was the only one who'd heard Mom crying every night, isolated and dismissed, then was I also the only one who knew that sacrifice wasn't her choice? As people settled back into their seats, I stood. My heart pounded in my chest, but my voice held steady. I'd like to say a few words. The room froze for a beat, then came the sound of chairs creaking, murmurs gliding like cold wind. My father turned, his eyes sharp as blades, but he didn't object. I walked toward the mic, hands trembling slightly but heart unmoved. "I'm Ivy Monahan, Caroline's youngest daughter." I looked around the room. My mother spent her life serving this community. But I've always wondered what happened to the charity fund she built for over a decade. It was like the air had been sucked out of the sanctuary. Ruth Ann sprang to her feet. "Not here," she nearly shouted. "This is a memorial, not a place for baseless accusations." I turned toward her. If the questions are baseless, then why can't anyone answer them? Her face flushed red. My father stepped forward, lifting a hand like shielding someone from a storm. "Ivy," he said slowly, his voice warm but hollow. "You're hurting your mother. This isn't how Caroline wanted to be remembered." "No," I said. "But it is how she needed to be protected." Someone stood. An older woman, Mrs. Edith, Mom's closest friend, nodded at me from the back. But just as quickly, Ruth Ann closed the space between us, her voice dropping low, just for me. "If you're ready to burn everything down over some childish resentment, go ahead, but don't act surprised when Dad cuts you off again." "He already did," I whispered back. "The day Mom died and he didn't shed a single tear." I stepped down from the pulpit. No applause. No comments. My father gave a small signal to church security. Two large men started walking toward me. "Ma'am, please step outside," one of them said. "Pastor's request." I didn't fight. I just looked at my father. He met my eyes with a coldness that felt surgical. "You're no longer part of this," he said. I stepped out into the sunlight. It was just as golden as before, but now it burned like fire. Behind me, I heard the church doors close. The sound wasn't loud, but it was final. I pulled out my phone. No messages. No missed calls. I had no one left in this family. But I still had my mother. And I still had the truth. And just as I slid into the driver's seat, my phone buzzed. An anonymous text message. "Your mom left something behind. Check her old Bible. Page 317. I don't remember breathing until the car rolled out of the lot. My hands were shaking. My throat tightened. I didn't know who sent the message. But I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The house Mom used to live in is now a controlled memorial space locked up tight by Ruth Ann like it's some kind of museum. But luckily, I still had the spare key Mom gave me back in 2019, along with a warning. "Only use this if silence ever feels dangerous." I laughed back then. But now, that sentence hits me like a warning I should have never brushed off. The house was eerily quiet as I stepped inside. The scent of dried flowers and old wood clung to the air, still and thick. I didn't know what I was expecting, a whisper from the past? A trace of warmth left behind. But no. Only silence. Heavy, draped over everything silence. I walked into Mom's bedroom. Everything was neatly arranged, like she could walk through the door any moment. Pillows stacked, photo frames perfectly aligned, and on the nightstand a worn, brown leather Bible. I flipped to page 317, just like the message said. A thin piece of paper, folded in fours, was tucked against the edge. My heart thudded hard as I pulled it free. It was a hand-drawn sketch, pencil lines faded but still clear enough. At the top, it read, "Not all truth lives in the light." The map sketched out the basement of the old church building, the one beside the main sanctuary, abandoned since the electrical fire years ago. I recognized the cross symbol, with a line drawn toward the left corner wall. There, a tiny arrow pointed down, with a note beside it. Under the third stone. I sank onto the bed, the map still in my hand. Questions crashed over me like waves. What had Mom hidden there? And why? She had trusted Dador, at least she used to. But in her final year, she started pulling back from the community, skipping meetings, telling me over and over, "They don't listen to me anymore." At the time, I thought she was just fading. That grief had turned to paranoia. But now I see it, maybe she was the clearest-eyed of all of us. I took a photo of the map with my phone, then carefully folded it and slid it into my jacket pocket. My mind was racing, but everything felt razor-sharp. If Mom told me to find a stone slab in a long-abandoned building, this wasn't nostalgia. This was evidence. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A woman's voice, old and trembling, spoke softly. "Ivy, this is Miss Mavis. You may not remember me, but your mother trusted me." I froze. "Yes, I'm listening." "When?" "I can't say much over the phone, but if you're looking into things, you need to know your mother didn't die of a stroke, and your father is not innocent." The words hit me like lightning. "Can you come see me?" she added. "There's something she left for you." I took a deep breath. "What's the address?" She gave an old house near the pine woods at the edge of town. I jotted it down, heart still hammering. When I hung up, my hands were damp with sweat. I turned back toward the room where my mother once slept, once breathed, once whispered to me, "Truth doesn't need to scream to survive." I used to think that was some kind of poetic nonsense. Now I understand it was a set of instructions. I stepped out of the house, map in my pocket, Mavis's name in my contacts, and in my chest a quiet, creeping sense that everything I ever believed about my family was about to be flipped upside down. And this time, I wasn't walking in with blind faith. I was walking in with proof. I met Miss Mavis just before sunset, at a small wooden cabin nestled deep in the pine woods. The house looked like it had been pulled straight out of the past. Yellowed walls, lace curtains over narrow windows, and a porch sagging gently from age. Miss Mavis was well into her 70s, her silver hair pinned up high, and on her finger, she wore a silver cross ring identical to the one Mom used to wear. "You look more like your mother than you realize," she said as she opened the door. The living room smelled of cinnamon and mint. I stepped in, heart pounding like every step might crack the floor beneath me. On a round wooden table sat an old cassette recorder, the tape still slotted inside. "I've kept it since the day Caroline walked out of her last church board meeting," she said. "She pressed it into my hand and told me, if anything happened, to give it to you." I sat down and hit play. A bit of static came first, then my mother's voice. Soft, but clear. Stronger than I'd ever heard her when she was alive. "If Ivy's hearing this, then I've failed to protect the truth. Sweetheart, I didn't die from a stroke. I was drugged. They wanted me quiet because of what I found. About the will. About illegal transfers from the church's accounts. Your father and Ruth Ann know. And if they find out you're digging, they'll try to stop you. No matter what it takes." I couldn't breathe. My lips went dry. My hands clenched tight around the arms of the chair. Miss Mavis didn't say a word. She just looked at me the way you look at someone waking up from a nightmare and realizing it's real. "Do you know what my mother hid?" I asked, my voice rough. "Not exactly," she shook her head. "But Caroline once said, if she sees the map, then she's ready. And if you are ready, then you need to go back to the one place your father and Ruth Ann won't step foot in anymore." "The old church?" She nodded. "Yes. But you have to go now. And you have to go when they're not watching." So I went back. 1 in the morning. Flashlight in one hand, palms slick with sweat, the crumpled map in my jacket pocket. The weeds outside the old church came up to my knees. A crooked wooden sign warned, "Keep out. Danger." The side door was rusted, but the lock hung loose, like it hadn't been touched since the last decade. I wedged a pry bar into it. A soft click. The door creaked open with a hinge scream that sounded like someone crying. Inside was pitch dark. The smell of rot and mold hit me like a wall. Every footstep across the warped wooden floor cracked like it might collapse, like I was walking over the buried past they'd tried so hard to seal off. I followed the map, heading to the far left corner of the basement. My flashlight skimmed across dust, scattered papers, a crooked portrait of Jesus tilted like someone had yanked it off the wall in a hurry. I counted down, 2, 3, the third stone. I knelt. Reached out. Tapped it. Hollow echo. My heart slammed against my ribs. I wedged the crowbar into the edge of the stone and started to lift. Dust burst into the air, the smell of damp earth mixing with something else. Metal. I held my breath, trying not to imagine blood. Finally, the slab came loose. Beneath it was a shallow hollow. Not deep, but enough to hide something. A metal box, coated in dust. I dragged it up heavy, ice cold, and just as I set it down, a sound came from behind me. Clack. A door closing. I whipped around. No one. I scanned the room with my flashlight. Nothing. But the air had changed. It was colder, pressing in on me like invisible claws around my ribs. I crouched down and opened the box. Inside were envelopes, a USB drive, and a small leather notebook. I hadn't even reached for them when something moved at the edge of my light beam. I spun. This time, I heard it clearly. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Echoing. Someone or something was in the room with me. I didn't scream. I just bolted upright, clutching the box tight, and ran. Up the stairs. Toward the door. Pushed the rusted metal. It wouldn't budge. Locked. Someone had locked me in. I slammed my fists. Threw my shoulder into the door. Nothing. Below me, the footsteps came again. Closer now. I turned, heart pounding loud enough to drown out thought. No place to hide. No one to call. And then, a thought flickered through me. If they locked me in, they know I found it. And that means I've just become the target. Not of some evil spirit, but of my own family. I don't remember how many times I slammed against that door. My arm had gone numb, my shoulder throbbed like it had been hit with a hammer. Every heartbeat in my chest pounded like a war drum, pushing me to keep going, but the basement door didn't budge. I forced myself to calm down, breathing deep. My flashlight began flickering, the dying warning of a battery near its end. The church basement was black as hell, and I was in it alone, with the box my mother left behind, and footsteps that never sounded close enough to place. I stepped back, pressing my back against the cold stone wall, eyes fixed on the deep hallway beyond. My hands trembled, but I forced them to open the box again. Inside, alongside the worn leather notebook and USB drive, was a small, old-school voice recorder the kind Mom used when I was little to record her Bible study notes. I clicked it on. The battery still had life. And the moment her voice came through, I forgot the cold, forgot the lurking footsteps. "Ivy, if you're hearing this, I might no longer be with you. But I prepared for this. I knew they wouldn't stop. Ruth Ann and your father, they've done everything they can to bury the truth." I sank to the floor, eyes wide in the dark like I might see her again somehow. That voice, it wasn't the fading, breathless voice from Mom's last days. This was a sharp, strong Caroline, a woman I never knew existed. They forged my will. I had planned to leave the church to its people to keep it from falling into the hands of those who exploit faith for power. But Ruth Ann found someone. Someone to rewrite the documents, make it look like I handed it all over. They copied my handwriting. Even sedated me when I got too alert. I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood. I'd always known something was wrong. The way Ruth Ann dodged questions about the charity account. The way Dad looked at me like I was a splinter he couldn't pull. And now, it all made sense. I hid the USB because it contains everything I backed: mails, bank records, and a video. I didn't trust anyone else. Only you. If you found it, you're ready, but be careful, sweetheart. You'll need an ally. Someone outside the family. Right then, I heard metal shift behind me. A soft click, and then the door creaked open. I spun around. No one stood there. The basement door hung open, hinges whining like they were gasping for breath. No shadow. No more footsteps. Just cold night air, whispering down from the hallway above. I clutched the box to my chest and didn't wait another second. I ran. Bolted up the stairs like something was chasing me. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for breath. The grass was wet with dew. I stood in the dark, shaking, cold sweat trailing down my spine. I turned back. The door was slowly swinging closed behind me, as if the building itself had chosen to let me go. Just this once. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text appeared. "If you don't stop, it won't just be doors that get locked." I stared at the screen. No name, no signature. But I knew. Someone was watching me. And they knew exactly what I was doing. I started walking. No looking back. No stopping until I reached the tiny apartment Mom had rented for me during my final year of college. My hands were still clutching the metal box, like if I let go, everything would vanish like a bad dream. I placed the recorder on the table and plugged the USB into my laptop. A single folder appeared, labeled, "For Ivy, if they lie." I didn't open it. Not because I was scared, but because I knew, once I did, there'd be no going back. I picked up my phone and called the only person I could trust. Lucas. An attorney. The one who helped my mom with her legal paperwork. The only person she ever told me, "If you can't find me, find him." The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. He picked up, his voice rough from sleep. "Ivy?" I swallowed hard. "I have something my mother left behind, and I think it might bring the whole church down." Lucas showed up just 15 minutes later, though I hadn't given him the exact address. Maybe he still remembered the apartment. Mom had once met with him here while working on the community fund. When I opened the door, he was in a wrinkled button-down, hair tousled from sleep. But his eyes snapped into focus the moment he saw me clutching the metal box like I was holding the last warm part of someone's body. "Are you hurt?" he asked, glancing at the bruise on my wrist. "Number. But I think they want me silent." I stepped back inside, locking the door 3 times. "I just escaped the old church. Someone locked me in the basement, and I have the proof my mom left before she died." Lucas didn't say a word. He sat down at the kitchen table, waiting for me to open the box. When I laid out the notebook, the recorder, and the USB drive, he didn't touch them, just stared. Something shifted in his eyes. Something deeper than legal concern. Recognition. "You sure you want to go through with this?" he asked. "Because after this, no one in your family stays your family." He nodded. No hesitation. I opened the worn leather notebook. Inside were pages of Mom's handwriting, names of account holders, dates, bank transfers, amounts withdrawn from the congregation's charity fund. Even Ruth Ann's handwriting appeared in the margins, scrawled in a hurry. "Cover this before the board meeting, don't let Ivy see." I pushed the notebook to Lucas. He read through it line by line, jaw tight. "This is preliminary evidence, but if your mom was forced to sign anything, I need to compare it with her original signature." I nodded and opened the final envelope inside the box. It held a copy of my mom's original will signed by a notary, but marked with her distinct handwriting, angular, familiar, exactly how I remembered it from middle school permission slips. I pulled out the version Ruth Ann had publicly presented from a drawer. We laid them side by side. The signature looked the same. But it wasn't. It was too the same. Like someone had traced it from memory and formula but without the soul. Lucas looked at me. "This signature's been forged. See here? Inconsistent pressure, the slant is wrong. And hear this curve? Classic sign of someone using their non-dominant hand to copy." I stared at the 2 pages, head buzzing. Years of being called too sensitive, paranoid, dramatic. And now, in my hands, I held the truth my mother had once screamed in silence. Lucas pulled the laptop close and opened the USB. I sat beside him as the folder titled, "For Ivy, If They Lie," came up. Inside, a video. My hand shook as I hit play. My mother appeared on the screen, wearing a gray sweater, scarf wrapped around her neck, sitting on a hospital bed. She looked straight into the camera like she was looking right through it, right at me. "If you're watching this, Ivy," she said, "then I couldn't stop them on my own. Your father and Ruth Ann planned it long before I got sick. It's not about the congregation, it's about control. And they know. You're the only one who won't look away." I covered my mouth. Lucas bowed his head. My mother's voice didn't tremble. "They thought I was weak. And maybe I was. But I wasn't stupid. I didn't sign anything that day. If a document exists, it's fake." The video ended. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat there completely still, like even breathing too hard might make the evidence disappear. Lucas placed his hand on the documents. "I'll take this to the legal office first thing in the morning. You should prepare yourself. If you go public, there's no going back." I nodded. They already cast me out of the church. Out of the family, I've got nothing left to lose. We organized the papers. Lucas left just before dawn. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the signatures, unreal, full of life. One fake, cold, and practiced. By noon the next day, Ruth Ann showed up at my apartment unannounced. I didn't open the door right away. I peered through the peephole. She was wearing a cream-colored suit, looking like she'd stepped out of a catalog for moral superiority. I opened the door. "Just enough." "Ivy," she said, her voice sweeter than usual. "I heard you've been digging up the past." I didn't answer. I just held out a photocopied page from Mom's will, her original handwriting, her true signature, perfect in pressure and tilt. Ruth Ann looked at the paper. For 2 seconds, her eye twitched, her hand stiffened. She swallowed hard. "Fake," she said without meeting my eyes. Without looking at the signature. "No," I said. "What's fake is what you've been hiding. And you know it." Our eyes locked. No more masks. No more polite smiles. Ruth Ann lowered her voice. "If you keep going, Dad won't forgive you. He'll cut you off from everything." I gave a quiet laugh. Good. Because this time, I'm not looking for his forgiveness. I'm looking for justice. And as the door closed between us, I knew. Ruth Ann's hands were finally shaking. Not because of me, but because of Mom. Because of the truth. And because she knew I wasn't stopping. I don't know the exact moment I stopped fearing Ruth Ann. Maybe it was when I saw her flinch at my mother's handwriting. Maybe it was hearing Mom's voice in the video, saying plainly, "They planned this before I ever got sick." But what I knew for certain was I wasn't the same woman who got thrown out of church for asking one inconvenient question. I was the only one willing to rip open the plaster they used to cover the truth. That night, I returned to the old church for the second time. Alone again. But this time, I didn't just bring a flashlight. I brought a masonry hammer, a hand shovel, and the map my mother left behind. Every tool carried the weight of a resolve they couldn't bury with threats. I entered through the same ground floor side window I used to sneak through as a child during Holy Mass. It still fit. The wood was still soft. The moldy air just as thick as before, but this time, my hands didn't shake. The basement felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for me. I followed the map, kneeling at the back left corner behind the old pulpit, where Mom had marked, under the third stone. Last time, I had only managed to pry up the edge. This time, I brought a hammer to break through the cement shell completely. I struck. Each blow landed like a knock on a door that had been locked for decades. The concrete splintered into chunks. Dust rose in clouds, and I covered my mouth. But I didn't stop. Finally, beneath the shattered tile and cracked cement, there it was, a steel casing. Black, heavy, with rusted hinges and a round lock. A safe, not the digital kind. This was the kind people buried back when records lived on paper. When truth had to be hidden underground to survive. I dropped to the ground, sweat sliding down my temples. I'd never opened a safe like this before, but I recognized the tiny key from the hidden compartment in Mom's box. Maybe. Just maybe. I pulled it out. Took a deep breath. Slipped it into the lock. It fit. A soft click echoed through the chamber, a sound that struck my memory like lightning. The exact sound of the jewelry box Mom used to keep when I was a little girl. I opened the lid. Inside was a bundle of documents sealed in old plastic, a black velvet box, and a journal. I pulled each item out one by one, like peeling away the layers of a lie that had lived too long. The files included detailed account statements from Mom's final 3 years. Dozens of unexplained transfers. Transactions signed under C. Monahan, but the handwriting was wrong. Some pages had blurred out lines, reprinted with typed fonts. All of it listed Ruth Ann as Mom's legal proxy. I opened the velvet box. Inside was a gold ring, Caroline etched along the inside band, and a small photo. My mother, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. They were in the churchyard. Mom's eyes looked frightened. His hand on her shoulder was far too familiar to be professional. A letter was folded behind it. Just one handwritten line. If they find this man, they'll destroy everything I've hidden to protect you. My stomach dropped. Who was he? What was his connection to Mom, to the forged will? Was this the man who had coerced her? I opened the journal. The first page was dated 1 month after diagnosis. I read. Each entry was a whisper from a woman who knew she was running out of time and opportunities to be heard. She wrote of being drugged, of being encouraged to sign over her documents and rest, of Ruth Ann printing out a revised will and just asking for a signature as a formality, of no longer trusting her husband and fearing him more than the illness inside her. At the bottom of one page, a sentence was underlined. My daughter doesn't need a loud voice. She only needs to be believed. A quote. I closed the journal. Saturday in silence, surrounded by rubble, crumbled plaster, and a truth too heavy to name. No one could call this paranoia anymore. No one could say I imagined it. I had the records, the journal, the photo, and for the first time in my life, I had the right to speak, and I didn't need anyone's permission. I stood, gathered everything in both arms. And as I stepped out of the basement, I thought to myself, if this is a battlefield, I'm not walking in with weapons. I'm walking in with the truth. And it weighs more than any sword ever forged. I got home just before 3 a.m., covered in dust, my head still buzzing from what I'd uncovered. I set the portable safe down on the table and laid everything out again, as if to reassure myself I hadn't imagined it. My mother's handwritten journal, the stack of financial records with notes and annotations, the photo of the strange man, and that one-line letter powerful enough to make everything around me feel like it was trembling. I flipped open the journal to the middle, where Mom had written about the first time she was signed for in a financial transaction. Ruth Ann said everything would be easier if I didn't have to think too much. Just sign, she said. But I noticed the handwriting wasn't mine. They'd been practicing my signature. And I knew because the C was never curved the way I write it. I was taught as a girl downward curve, not looped up. Ha. My eyes moved to the line below. If you find what I left behind, don't let them burn it, because they'll try. My chest ached. The apartment was completely still. Only the ticking clock remained like the last witness to a war no one dared to name. I photographed every page. Backed up 3 copies, one on my laptop, one to the cloud, one onto a portable hard drive I locked inside my personal safe. I'd grown up being dismissed, pushed aside. But this time, I wouldn't let them dismiss the truth. Just before sunrise, I sent Lucas an email. I have everything. The journal, the financial records, the photo, and my mother's words. I think it's time. He responded with one line. It is, and I know exactly where to take it. That afternoon, I wore a black button-down shirt, my hair tied back neatly, and walked straight into Harkins and Fellows' law office in downtown Oak Hollow. Lucas was already in the lobby, leather briefcase in hand, his expressions so sharp even the receptionist stepped aside. We're filing everything with the probate court and requesting an immediate freeze on all financial activity related to the church estate, he said like he was reading out a verdict. I'm also submitting an emergency petition for will verification and requesting a criminal investigation if any signature is found to be forged. I nodded. No nerves. Just calm. The kind of calm that only comes when you're holding the truth. Not loud confidence, but a still, quiet certainty. Lucas walked with me into the county judge's office. The judge was an older man with silver hair and glasses resting halfway down his nose. He read through each document slowly, carefully, like he was reading his own obituary. When he got to the journal, he paused. Mrs. Monahan wrote she was coerced into signing? I nodded. And my mother tried to leave proof. She said she'd try to get it to a lawyer, but she wasn't sure she'd make it in time. He nodded. If there's any indication the will was forged or signed under duress, we have grounds to freeze the assets until the court has ruled. And if there's evidence of intentional concealment or forgery, Lucas added, then the case becomes criminal. That sentence rang in my head like a church bell. But not the kind from Sunday service. The kind that warns of fire. That night, I came back to the apartment expecting peace. But the moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The front door was intact, but the curtains were drawn unevenly. A picture frame on the shelf was face down, glass cracked. I checked the document box, it was still there. But the photocopy of my mother's journal that I had left out on the table was gone. I froze. For a few seconds, it felt like something had closed around my throat, not fear, but confirmation. They knew what I had. And they were willing to come here. I called Lucas. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. I sent a message. Someone broke in. Journal copy is gone. Originals still safe. I'm not staying here tonight. As soon as I hit send, another text popped up on my screen. No name. No number. No emoji. Just one line. Next time, we won't just take paper. I didn't tremble. I didn't hyperventilate. I didn't collapse like some made-for-TV moment. I just stood there. For a while. Looking around the room I once believed was safe. Then I pulled the small suitcase from under my bed and packed what remained, the original journal, the USB, the financial files. Before leaving, I taped a handwritten note to the front door. If you were bold enough to come here, be bold enough to show up in court. I didn't know what Ruth Ann or my father would do tomorrow night. But I knew this much. They were scrambling. Because now, they weren't just up against Caroline Monahan's daughter. They were up against the truth they'd buried in concrete. And I was the only one willing to dig it back up. I spent the night sleeping on Lucas's couch, my mind still spinning with journal entries, photos, and a threat typed in a font colder than the person who sent it. Lucas stayed at the dining table almost all night, backing up every file to a secure hard drive, the laptop's blue glow flickering against his glasses like a faint flame in the middle of a war zone. She came into your apartment, Lucas said when I stepped out of the bathroom the next morning, towels still wrapped around my damp hair. Either hair or someone she sent. But the fact they left a warning? That was their first mistake. Why? Because now the court can treat it as witness intimidation. And he looked up at me, just gained another card to play. I sat beside him as the last folder from my mother's USB loaded. A video file, not just another voice recording, but full footage. The resolution was grainy, but I instantly recognized the room. The small prayer room behind the church. The silver crucifix on the wall behind her was unmistakable. I clicked. The video played. My mother appeared, thinner than I remembered, her hair wrapped in a scarf, but her gaze was sharp as glass. She looked straight into the camera. No notes. No script. Just her voice, calm and clear, like a final confession left behind. "If you're watching this, Ivy," she said, "it means I couldn't protect what was right. And that's okay because I always knew, one day, you'd find the truth." "Oh, I gripped my sleeve. Lucas placed a hand on the mouse and paused the video. "You sure you want to keep going? Why do you think I came here?" I answered, then nodded. "Play it." The video resumed. "You have to understand," my mother said, her voice steady but slower now. "They didn't start with lies, they started with fear. Fear that if you speak up, you'll be cast out. And if you stay silent, you'll be kept safe." I stayed silent. But then I saw the charity funds vanish, saw the will rewritten. And I realized they're not afraid of the truth, they're afraid of you finding it. Lucas paused again, this time rewinding and zooming in. A shadow moved behind her, blurry, face obscured, but the posture, the stance, unmistakable. "Wait," I whispered. "Stop, zoom in." Lucas did. The figure stood behind the thin curtain. One hand held something, maybe a folder. The head tilted slightly toward my mother, like waiting for instructions, and on their feet white leather heels. The exact kind Ruth Ann always wore to major church events. My heart froze. At the end of the video, my mother stared straight into the lens and said, "Don't let them offer God lies. If you ever have to choose between peace and truth, choose truth. Peace can be bought, truth cannot." The screen went dark. The room fell silent. Lucas didn't speak, neither did I. We just looked at each other. And we both understood. This wasn't just about inheritance. Not just about signatures and money. My mother had seen everything. And she had chosen to leave behind the matchstick knowing it might burn everything to the ground. The next morning, we went straight to the county courthouse with the original video file. Lucas handed the copy to Judge Radley along with a formal petition to submit new evidence. As the judge began watching the footage, he removed his glasses midway. "The woman in the background, is that Ruth Ann Monahan?" he asked. Lucas nodded. "We believe so. And we'll be submitting a forensic report to verify both the timestamp and footage location." I think," the judge said slowly, "it's time we schedule a preliminary hearing." He closed the folder and looked directly at me. "Miss Monahan, from this point forward, you're entitled to request special protection. Because anyone willing to erase a mother's name from her own will may do far worse to erase the truth." I nodded. I didn't need a police escort. I didn't need guards posted at my door. I just needed to stand in the light of the truth, of my mother, and of her final words. Don't let them offer God lies. I stepped out of the courthouse into a blazing late afternoon sun. The wind picked up, scattering a few loose papers from Lucas's folder. He bent down to collect them, then looked up at me. "You ready for the hearing?" I looked him straight in the eye. "No," I said. "I'm not ready. But I'll be there." That Sunday service was unlike any I'd ever known. Not because of the sermon, not because of the hymns, but because I walked in not with a white dress, not with a forced smile, but with a USB drive holding the video my mother recorded before she died. The service started like every week. My father at the pulpit, Ruth Ann in the front row, back straight, scanning the congregation like a politician on election day. I chose a pew near the back, second to last row, right beside the wall where they used to hang choir robes when I was a kid. In my coat pocket was the USB drive, backed up and labeled in black ink. Caroline's Truth. The sermon began with the usual words, faith, forgiveness, grace. And in these uncertain times, my father preached, voice rich and practiced like he was addressing a crowd of 10,000. We must stand together in the light of truth, not of the world, but of God. I stood up. At first, some thought I was just stepping out, but I walked straight down the aisle toward the pulpit. Whispers rose around me. Ruth Ann turned, her brows tightening not from surprise, but from the fear of a prophecy she hoped would never come true. "Excuse me," I said, my voice amplified by the sound system, steady and clear. "But I have something to share with this congregation. And I believe my mother would want me to." My father frowned. "Ivy, this is a service." "Exactly. And in the house of God, no one should hide the truth." I didn't retreat. I didn't ask for permission. I turned to the sound technician sitting at the booth. "Can you play this video? Just plug it into the USB port. No edits needed." He hesitated, glancing at Ruth Ann, then at my father. "I'm the named petitioner in the legal case to investigate the will," I said, my voice low but firm. "If you don't play it, I'll show it in court. But I think everyone here deserves to see it first." The room went silent. The technician inserted the drive. The screen behind the pulpit flickered, then lit up. My mother appeared, sitting in the dim glow of the old prayer room. "Hello," she began, voice tired but unwavering. "I'm Carolyn Monahan. If this is being played, it means I'm no longer here. But it also means I trusted my daughter enough to place the truth in her hands." No one moved. She spoke of hidden transactions, of a forged will, of being drugged, isolated, silenced in the very church she helped build. Ruth Ann and Charles wanted me silent. But I won't be. I recorded this to protect what I believed in, justice and God. When the video ended, no one clapped. No one prayed. Just silence thick, dense, like the cracked walls of a sanctuary after an earthquake. I stepped back to the mic. "This is the truth my mother left behind. And I didn't bring it to divide us, but to end the lies that have lived in this sacred place for far too long. If our faith can't face truth, then maybe we've been worshiping the wrong God." A voice spoke up from the front row. "Mrs. Edith." "She's right," she said, hands trembling around her Bible. "Caroline told me. But I was afraid. I'm sorry." Ruth Ann shot to her feet, face pale. "This is defamation. There's no verification, no notarization." Lucas stepped in from the main doors at the back, holding a folder sealed with the county court stamp. "Actually," he said, calm and composed, "there is. The court has validated the recordings, the journal, and the documentation. And the preliminary hearing is scheduled for next week." Ruth Ann turned to my father, looking for a lifeline. But he just sat there. Still, silent. Not angry, not defensive. Just hollow. And in that moment, I understood, he wasn't shocked. He just never thought I'd take it this far. When the service ended, no one shook Ruth Ann's hand. No one approached my father. They simply stood, quietly, and filed out like people leaving not a worship service, but an awakening. Lucas walked beside me, still holding the court documents. "You okay?" he asked. I looked around the sanctuary where my mother used to pray, where I used to sing in the choir, where an entire life had been shaped, and nearly silenced. "No," I said. "But I'm okay enough to keep going." And for the first time, I walked out of that church not with my head down, not with shame, but with the truth beside me like a torch. A torch no one would ever be able to extinguish again. That night, I returned to Lucas's apartment exhausted but strangely alert. Like the feeling you get after surviving a car crash and not quite understanding how you're still standing. All afternoon, my phone had been vibrating nonstop, texts, missed calls, emails from relatives I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Some offered praise. "Your mother would be so proud." Others were subtle threats. "You just ruined the family's good name." And a few weren't subtle at all. "Who do you think you are? Don't think you'll be safe if this goes to court. I know where you live." Lucas walked the apartment, checking window locks, bolting doors, placing a small security camera in the hallway outside. I didn't stop him. For the first time in my life, I knew I wasn't just fighting lies, I was fighting people who couldn't handle the truth. Around 11 p.m., I sat alone in the kitchen, Mom's journal open in front of me, stirring a mug of cold tea I'd forgotten an hour ago. The hallway light still glowed. Lucas was in his office, talking quietly to someone from his legal team. Everything inside the apartment felt still. Until I heard it. A soft click at the back window above the sink. I turned, heart tightening. Something or someone had just brushed past the edge of the curtain. I stepped forward carefully and pulled the curtain back just 1 inch. A shadow. Not moving. Not looking inside. Just standing there, a few steps from the glass, partially hidden under the bougainvillea outside. I stepped back. My heart beat so loud I could hear it. I see him. Lucas's voice came from behind me. He was watching through the camera feed. I turned. Can you see his face? Number male. Black jacket. He stood there for 17 seconds. A soft ping came from my phone. New message. I opened it. A photo. It was taken from outside the window. Me hand on my mother's journal, the kitchen light casting a shadow across my cheek. No caption. No number. Just a silent warning. Lucas looked over my shoulder, jaw tight. You've backed up the journal? All of it. USB, cloud, hard drive. Printed copies, 3 of everything. Good. He took my phone, snapped a screenshot, and forwarded it to himself. We'll file this as evidence. This isn't just about a will anymore, this is witness intimidation. I nodded, still waiting for my pulse to calm. And I know they won't stop there, I said. They've lost control of the narrative. They're about to be humiliated in court and in front of the whole town. Lucas looked at me for a long moment before saying, the closer you get to the light, the bigger the shadow. I sat back down and reopened the journal. On one page, in Mom's familiar slanted script, she'd written, if they come back, it means what I've hidden is too close to the truth. Below that, a section had been scribbled out. I took a charcoal pencil and gently shaded over the page. A faint line began to surface like a whisper rising from the grave. I once overheard Ruth Ann say, once Mom signs, she doesn't get to choose anymore. I took a picture of it. The next morning, Lucas and I returned to Judge Radley. This time, he saw us in his private officino receptionist, no appointment needed. We showed him the message, the photo, and the newly uncovered journal line. We have grounds to request temporary witness protection, he said after reviewing it all. And I strongly recommend Miss Monahan avoid returning to her apartment until the investigation is complete. I nodded. I'll stay with a friend. And I'm not backing down. Judge Radley leaned back and sipped his tea. You're changing how people remember your mother. And you're forcing an entire system to take a second look at itself. That's not going to feel comfortable. I'm not doing it for comfort, I replied. I'm doing it because she deserved better. On the way back, Lucas was quiet for a while. Then he said softly, you know, Ivy, people aren't afraid of the truth itself. They're afraid of the person who says it at the right time. You just did what Ruth Ann never could. She knew, but she couldn't stand alone. I turned to him. Well, now she doesn't have to, I said. Because I'm not standing alone anymore. And for the first time in years. I didn't just say it to feel strong. I said it because I believed it. Because this time, I had the truth. And someone standing beside me. On the day of the preliminary hearing, the entire town of Oak Hollow felt like it was holding its breath. Local press crowded the steps of the Monroe County Courthouse, scribbling notes, cameras flashing like bursts of lightning beneath a heavy gray sky. Inside, Courtroom 3 was discreet but no less tense because everyone knew this wasn't just a hearing about signatures. It was the first real clash between truth and legend. Between me and my family. I entered the courtroom with a small leather bag that held everything. My mother's original journal, side-by-side signature comparisons, photos, the USB, notarized copies from the judge's office, and a handwritten statement, my declaration. I wore a charcoal gray blouse, formal, but not meek. Pinned to my chest was a silver flower brooch, the one Mom had worn on her last Easter Sunday. Ruth Ann was already there. She sat upright, dressed in an ivory suit, hair pinned back, her eyes locked on the judge's chair as if sheer focus could will the hearing to end faster. My father didn't come. I wasn't surprised. Lucas sat beside me, a half-inch thick folder perfectly organized, color-tabbed and labeled. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Judge Radley entered. The room fell silent. We are convened today to evaluate the legitimacy of newly submitted materials in the Monahan estate case, he began, voice even and cold as steel, and to determine whether the currently filed will holds legal merit. Ruthan's attorney stood first, a short, polished man with neatly combed hair and a voice as slick as oil. "We believe Miss Ivy Monahan is making emotionally driven claims, lacking verified evidence beyond a video of uncertain origin, an unnotarized journal, and financial records not independently audited. This, Your Honor, is a clear case of internal family conflict, not a matter for criminal scrutiny." Lucas stood. He didn't look at notes. He just reached into the folder and pulled out a large envelope. "We submit the original journal of Mrs. Caroline Monahan. 3 signature comparisons matching legal documents from 2007 to 2017. A USB containing a video recorded by Mrs. Monahan herself, with verified file creation timestamps from the court's digital forensic unit. And finally, a notarized copy of the original will, dated 2 weeks prior to the currently filed version, with verification from a neutral witness." Judge Radley opened the file. His eyes moved line by line. When he reached the journal page with my mother's words, "Don't let them offer God lies," he stopped. "Miss Monahan," he said, turning to me, "do you have an official statement for the court?" I stood, pulled a single sheet from my coat pocket, unfolded it. My voice was clear. Not loud, but steady. "I'm not here for property. I'm not here for power. I'm here so my mother's voice is recorded accurately for what she tried so hard to say. All her life, she was seen as weak because she chose to love quietly. But she wasn't weak. She just wasn't heard. Today, I speak not with emotion but with evidence. And I will keep speaking until justice is called by its right name." No one moved as I sat down. No rustling. No whispers. Judge Radley nodded. "Based on the submitted evidence, the court is ordering an immediate freeze on all financial activity tied to the church estate. Documents provided by Miss Ivy Monahan will be submitted to the Handwriting Verification Board for analysis. A formal hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Until then, all involved parties are prohibited from accessing, modifying, or destroying any assets tied to the disputed will." Gavel. 3 strikes. I exhaled. Not because I'd won, but because for the first time my mother was being heard not as a memory, but as a person. Ruthann waited for me outside in the parking lot. The sky had turned steel gray. A sharp breeze picked up, as if Oak Hollow itself knew something was about to change forever. She didn't smile, no more pretending. Just stared at me, eyes heavy, jaw tight. "You think you've won?" she said, not waiting for an answer. "I knew that woman. You idolize her too much, but she's the same one who taught me how to lie without blinking." I didn't flinch. I looked her dead in the eyes. "And I'm the one who's going to make you live with the cost of that lie." I turned and walked away. I didn't wait for her rebuttal. Behind me, I heard no footsteps. Just silence. But it wasn't the silence my family once used to bury things. It was the silence of something beginning to crumble. A family. A faith-branded empire. And a vow. This time, spoken not by someone they could silence with blood ties, but by the one daughter they never expected to speak at all. 3 weeks passed, and Oak Hollow was no longer the same. Monahan Memorial Church had temporarily closed its doors. Every Sunday morning, the local press parked outside, capturing a rare sight, a chapel without worshippers. The statue of Christ at the entrance had been covered with a white cloth like the entire town was in mourning. Not for the dead, but for the truth that had finally been unearthed from beneath its foundation of lies. The day of the formal trial arrived. I wore the same charcoal gray outfit. Lucas straightened my tie just outside the courtroom door, his fingers brushing my wrist like a silent message. "She's watching you." The courtroom was packed. Strangers. Familiar faces. Even some who had laughed at me years ago when I first questioned Ruthann about the charity fund. Ruthann wore a black suit this time. But the pride in her eyes was gone. There was something brittle about her now, like a glass sculpture that once thought it was made of steel. The hearing lasted 3 hours. The handwriting analyst testified. "The current will shows clear signs of forgery. It does not match with 27 other documents signed by Mrs. Caroline Monahan over a span of 15 years. My mother's video was played again, this time in a courtroom. When she said, "Don't let them offer God lies," several people bowed their heads. Ruthann stared straight ahead. But I saw their eyes shimmered. Not with remorse. with the realization that it was over. Finally, Judge Radley read the verdict. The court finds the existing will invalid. The handwritten will dated the 15th of August, verified with original signature and corroborating video evidence, is hereby restored as the official legal document. Furthermore, the court is ordering a criminal investigation into Miss Ruthann Monahan and Mr. Charles Monahan for suspected forgery and breach of fiduciary duty in the handling of charitable assets. 3 strikes of the gavel. Final. Like the lid closing on a chapter that could no longer be denied. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. 2 weeks later, I returned to the old church. For the first time, not in secret. The basement door had been broken open, the cement cleared away. Where my mother's safe had once been was now an empty slab of concrete. I laid down a photo of her smiling in the sunlight, hair tousled by wind. Beside it, I placed a laminated copy of her journal, labeled in bold. So no one forgets what happened here. As I climbed out of the basement, I felt something different in the air. No more cold, no more damp. Just warmth, gentle, like the building had finally exhaled. I chose not to press charges against Ruthann. Not because I forgave her, but because I understood the collapse of her reputation was a sentence no courtroom could match. And my father? He still hasn't called. But I know he saw the trial. Because a week later, I received a postcard, no name, no return address. Just an image, a dirt road, pine trees on both sides. On the back, in familiar handwriting. Caroline chose the right one to speak for her. See. I don't know for sure if it was from him. But I don't need to. Because I didn't do this for his approval. I did it for her. And for me. Lucas and I stood outside the church one late autumn evening. The wind swept through the stone benches, leaves swirled and danced in the breeze. "What are you going to do with the charity fund?" he asked. I smiled. "Restore it. But not under the family name, under hers. Caroline's Light Foundation. For women who were once forced into silence." He nodded, something quiet in his eyes. I looked up at the steeple, where the bell once rang every Sunday morning. "I don't need the bell anymore," I said. "I have a voice of my own now." Lucas gently took my hand. And in that moment, I knew. They could lie. They could lock doors. They could even threaten. But they could never kill the truth once it found someone willing to carry it forward. I was the torch my mother left behind. And now, I had lit it.